Hare Krishna. And welcome again to this Wednesday morning Bhagavatam talk. Iskcon, Oslo. We'll start with the Jai Radha Madhava prayer. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari
Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivaradhari
Jaya Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivaradhari
Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana
Yashodanandana Vraja Ranjana
Yamuna Tira Vanachari
Yamuna Tira Vanachari
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari
Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Nama Om Vishnupadaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pasyacha Dashatarine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pasyacha Dashatarine Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare
Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada
Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada
Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai.
jai. Right, so we're back reading the Srimad Bhagavatam on these Wednesday mornings in the temple, Iskcon, Oslo. We're continuing first canto, second chapter. We're now at text 10. And the verse is as follows. Kamasya nendriya priyitir labho jiveta yavata jivasya tattva jigyasa narto yas cheha karma bihi. Translation. Life's desires should never be directed toward sense gratification. One should desire only a healthy life or self-preservation, since a human being is meant for inquiry about the absolute truth. Nothing else should be the goal of one's works. Purport. I guess, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Yes, we're stressing a little bit here, but so we're forgetting some things. We're trying our best. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The completely bewildered material civilization is wrongly directed towards the fulfillment of desires in sense gratification. In such civilization, in all spheres of life, the ultimate end is sense gratification. In politics, social service, altruism, philanthropy, and ultimately in religion, or even in salvation, the very same tint of sense gratification is ever increasingly predominant. In the political field, the leaders of men fight with one another to fulfill their personal sense gratification. The voters adore so-called leaders only when they promise sense gratification. As soon as the voters are dissatisfied in their own sense gratification, they dethrone the leaders. The leaders must always disappoint the voters by not satisfying their senses. The same is applicable in all other fields. No one is serious about the problems of life. Even those who are on the path of salvation desire to become one with the absolute truth and desire to commit spiritual suicide for sense gratification. But the Bhagavatam says that one should not live for sense gratification. One should satisfy the senses only in so much as required for self-preservation and not for sense gratification. Because the body is made of senses which also require a certain amount of satisfaction, there are relative directions for satisfaction of such senses. But the senses are not meant for unrestricted enjoyment. For example, marriage, or the combination of a man with a woman, is necessary for progeny, but it is not meant for sense enjoyment. In the absence of voluntary restraint, there is propaganda for family planning, but foolish men do not know that family planning is automatically executed as soon as there is search after the absolute truth. Seekers of the absolute truth are never allured by unnecessary engagements in sense gratification, because the serious students seeking the absolute truth are always overwhelmed with the work of researching the truth. In every sphere of life, therefore, the ultimate end must be seeking after the absolute truth, and that sort of engagement will make one happy, because he will be less engaged in varieties of sense gratification. And what that absolute truth is explained as follows. So that will be next week. End of the purport. Kamasya nendriya pritir labho jiveta yavata jivasya tattva jigyasa narto yas cheha karma bihi. Life's desires should never be directed towards sense gratification. One should desire only a healthy life or self-preservation, since a human being is meant for inquiry about the absolute truth. Nothing else should be the goal of one's works. Right. Magyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Shakshurumilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Right. So we're back in the Bhagavatam, and it's so wonderful. And this morning again, Srila Prabhupada speaks very strongly about the modern civilization, or I guess any demoniac civilization. I mean, we hear stories, in the Puranas, there are these ancient stories of previous civilizations, and some of them were demoniac. So I guess they also qualify. But there's a sense of Srila Prabhupada speaking specifically about this modern civilization, right, in this purport. And he speaks very strongly, right? That in a civilization where the ultimate end is sense gratification, there is a contradictory civilization, right? Yes, the ultimate end is sense gratification in politics, social service. So that was my fields, working as a nurse, sort of the health side of social services, right? Altruism, philanthropy, religion, and salvation. So in all these different fields, sense gratification is the focus. And then the contradiction is that there's a guaranteed dissatisfaction of that, right? That desire. So, although it is admitted at the end of the purport that since there are senses, then the senses are meant to be fulfilled, right? There's nothing wrong with that, but it's like we spoke previously, like it's the overindulgence or the having the focus on that, or even sort of going beyond the natural satisfaction of the senses when it becomes, something ugly, something, and we can see it. These if you watch television, there's this series, now it's in fashion, it's in vogue, right, that to have these what is called reality shows, right, and then there's different types, I guess, of these shows, but some of them, they show the lives of very rich people. So there's different families portrayed, and I don't know, but sometimes, I come past these programs and I see them, I try to avoid seeing that because I find it to be so ugly. Anyway, sometimes, you see it, or there's a commercial or whatever, and then you see how they live, and it's just insane. It's insane. I mean, just so, they're portrayed in everyday life, but their makeup and dress is like, it's like, some gala, and I'm wondering if this is their everyday dress, then what do they look like for the galas, Who knows? It just looks ridiculous. And that could be sort of like one indication of that kind of overindulgence, where you just take it too far, and that's a problem with sense gratification, with lust and greed, is that lust is never satisfied. As soon as you get something, you want more, right? Like you eat one ice cream, you want another one. And there's another thing which struck me also, that okay, so now we're speaking sort of about the material side of our civilization, but there's also definitely a religious or religious part, right? But even there, this tint of sense gratification, and Prabhupada speaks about. So say you come to the path, you come to the point of salvation. Yes, but then you still want to become one with the absolute truth. So you want to be God, even there, and merge, right? And in that merging, it's spiritual suicide. It's just a very strong statement, and which means don't do it. I mean, there's no use, right? Because you'll just trying to extinguish desires, extinguish the senses, right? When it's actually said here plainly that senses are meant for enjoyment, and as souls we have spiritual senses. There's Atato Brahma, what's that? Not that one. Aham Brahmasmi, right? We're pleasure seekers. So it's natural to seek pleasure. And in Krishna consciousness, with serving Krishna, there's real enjoyment for the senses. And then there was another interesting point here also, which I found to be quite interesting, that was the other one. Atato Brahma Jigyasa. So right, we're to search for the absolute truth, to search for God. Like Ridananda Maharaj said, if you're a philosopher and you're not searching for God, you have abandoned philosophy. That is the point. Atato Brahma Jigyasa. And Jivasya Tattva Jigyasa, it's the truth, the absolute truth. Inquiries about we should now inquire about the absolute truth, right? And it's said here that seekers of the absolute truth are never allured by unnecessary engagement in sense gratification. And why? Why are they not allured? Because they are always overwhelmed with the work of researching the truth. So if one starts to engage in devotional service, if one starts to engage in the service of Krishna, your schedule is filled up, right? There's something for every second, right? There's no time. You see the pure devotees, they don't have, it's not maybe that they don't want sense gratification, it's just no time. There's no time for it. You're just completely absorbed. Like Haridas Thakur, like he would chant, 22, 23 hours a day was just japa, right? And then a little rest, maybe not. Perhaps a few grains of rice, and then continue. There's no time. And that indicates that there's a culmination, or sort of a natural momentum in spiritual life once you start. right? And then if there's this saying, right, that you take one step towards Krishna, he takes 100 steps, or 10 steps, or 100, or 1,000 steps towards you. So there's there's an indication of a momentum, like the snowball effect, right? That once it starts rolling, it will accumulate, and then in the end there's an avalanche, and material life, which is sense gratification, or an overindulgence in sense gratification, will just come to an end naturally, because there's no time anymore. It doesn't fit in the room, right? The room's been furnished. Yeah, I remember, being a married man at a certain point, you can't acquire any more furniture. There's a couch, there's everything. And it would just be in the way. So, and that can be inspiring. That is the great help that Krishna provides, right? That once you start on the path, then he will help you. He will unveil gradually, right? And in that unveiling, cessation of material life follows automatically, right? That was one of the previous verses, that for the devotee engaging in devotional service, right? Detachment and renunciation, it's just automatic. It's not even which is the difference between, let's say, for example, the extreme yogis, who really, Hare Krishna, the pigeons. The extreme yogis, the tapasvis, who go for yoga and renunciation, and that's really their focus, right? And they fast and stand on one leg and whatnot, and they achieve detachment after long periods of renunciation. But for the devotee, it's automatic. They don't even do it, but somehow they achieve it because they're just overwhelmed with their service. There's no time. I can remember that let's say, for example, Srila Prabhupada, or another example which I'm remembering now is I think that was one of the professors that Srila Prabhupada preached to, who became very favorable, and he wrote an introduction to the Bhagavatam, I think, or one of Srila Prabhupada's books. And then he was presented with the schedule of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, how he would, go to bed very early, sleep for a few hours, and then rise very early, chanting many, many rounds, and how he would eat, and how he would, and he was a magistrate, right, in Puri, so he was a judge, and so he had different schedules, according to his work, and then he had his sadhana, and then his reading and writing and correspondence. So when he saw the schedule, he expressed, "Oh, it's horrible, it's horrible," but it says something to the fact that Bhaktivinoda Thakur was just fully engaged, right? There was no time for any nonsense. Isn't that the saying? The idle mind is the devil's workshop, right? So as soon as the mind becomes idle, that's when the problem starts. And that was something I was reflecting on the other day. Was that, we're chanting japa. And then while chanting japa, you're saying the Maha Mantra, right? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And you're continuously saying it. And the idea is that you, while saying it out loud, then you're supposed to, when the mind wanders, you're supposed to bring it back to the mantra as a mental practice while saying the mantra. And then I was just thinking, yes, and then let's say then you finish your rounds. So I chanted, this morning I chanted my 16 rounds, and then they were finished. And then I'm wondering, then sort of when the job is finished, then you let the mind go. Oh, now I spent some time bringing it back to my mantra. The mantra is finished. Now it can float freely. But I was thinking, but maybe I'm supposed to continue that practice, bringing it back throughout the day, bringing it back. And then I was reflecting. I was thinking, wow, that's the real practice, right? To always bring it back to Krishna, and not just letting it loose on Maya, and then just floating around. And then it can become like there's a danger maybe of it becoming like a yogic practice, where it becomes like like a mental gymnastic. And although that's certainly a practice, I guess from this verse this morning, I think the great lesson is that if you just keep engaged, like physically engaged, then this is automatically taken care of in a way. There's no time for it to wander, because if you have a physical task, there is mental engagement, right? Or at least it should be. I remember working as a nurse. Then, I let's say I was engaged in the medicine room, and I'm doing the medicines for the day. I have to be very present, because there's no room for error. Like, some patients would have these very strong medications like morphine and different things, or antibiotics, and then it's very important. There's a very, very delicate balance, right? So I can remember that I had to be very present. I couldn't let the mind just drift. I had to sort of be there in the moment, and doing the counting and double check with my colleague, and we do the double signature and all that. So it definitely applies. I think that's a very, very interesting point this morning, that and Prabhupada even uses the word overwhelmed. So as soon as you sort of, there's a feeling of being overwhelmed in Krishna consciousness. Definitely. As soon as you start, and Krishna, opens the flow of nectar, you're washed away, right? You're washed away. And sometimes I have this experience where I'm sort of, especially maybe on these Sundays when we have our Sunday feast program, and I'm coming, and then there's so much going on. There's the kirtan, there's the lecture, and everything, and the prasadam, and the devotees, and you engage in some nice conversation. It's very Krishna centered. It's naturally, right? And then I'm in the car going home, and I have this feeling of deflating. I'm like, wow, that was like 3-4 hours where you were just swept away. And then I'm thinking sometimes, imagine your whole life being like that, where you never deflate. In a way, you never deflate. You're sort of always or at least there's that sense of, which I think is a wonderful experience sometimes, when you look over your shoulder and you look back and you see, wow, I did something, for Krishna. I can remember things being different, and now they're like this. What happened? What happened? Isn't that Kierkegaard, right?
Yes.
You live life forwards, but you understand it backwards. And then I remember hearing that statement, which I think is a wonderful statement. And then I was thinking, well, I guess then only Krishna lives it forwards and understands it's forward, right? And he understands both backwards and forwards. Yeah. Yes. So there's now that we're reading the Bhagavatam, and it's going on continually for the past few weeks and months, my realization has been that there's many practical points in the Bhagavatam, so that one can really understand how to do it in a way. If the Bhagavad Gita is sort of Bhagavad Gita sets the standard, right? Krishna says, surrender unto me. Right? And then the Bhagavatam shows you how to surrender. Small pointers, like, you do like this, you do like that, think about this, think about that. So it's I guess it's an invaluable supplement. Yeah. And then in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, then you see the real interactions, how the devotees really, how they live it, and these devotees surrounding Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and how they're interacting with him, and you get a real deep insight into his, mind, his reflections, and how the devotees are thinking. It's very interesting, very interesting. So I guess there's a stern sort of a little bit of a reprimand here, at least for me in my life, where right, there's certainly an venue or a natural it's natural for the senses to be satisfied. Like we've spoken about this so many times. Like the body needs rest and nourishment, right? And the eyes, they need something to behold, and the mind needs something to contemplate. But to have that ability to not go overboard, right? To restrict, and I guess the main lesson is that it's not so much a restriction or restricting as it is that you keep up the engagement, because then there will be natural restriction, where restriction of the senses mechanically, although it certainly has a place for the beginner, right? There's regulative principles and etiquettes, right? So there's certainly restrictions, but in the flow of devotional service, there's no time. There's no time. One becomes overwhelmed, or at least that's the goal. To be completely overwhelmed in service and have a full schedule. Yeah. And that's the the absolute truth. Seek after it, inquire into it. And in ending, I guess it should be said that in order to inquire into the absolute truth, you need a representative of the truth. Right? So we have our Srila Prabhupada, who wrote these wonderful books and who remains present in them and who watches over the Krishna consciousness movement eternally. And then his representatives, the living devotees who are around and who themselves follow. They are the guides. Right? They are the guides. And to come to the point where one is submissive enough to inquire properly, then everything will be revealed with time. So there's, and yet again, like this morning's verse is, it's an affirmation of how confident we can be in this Krishna consciousness. There's no worry, right? Krishna is there, and we can be confident. We should be, although one may not be perfect, as said in the mentioned in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam, that Krishna says, even though my devotee sometimes falls down, he should be happy and just worship me, because as long as one is engaged, one is proceeding onward, and eventually one will reach the goal. However, the during on the path or during, even during the journey, there's, as long as one is engaged, you're actually there. You just have to realize it. Right? What's the result of the chanting? More chanting. As long as you're chanting Hare Krishna. That's it. That's what they're doing in the spiritual world. They're chanting Hare Krishna. So if you chant Hare Krishna, you may not realize it yet, but you're already there. Any comment? Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.